Okay, so welcome everybody. Welcome to the Feel Safe in Your Body webinar. We are going to be going through a few different phases during this call. So like I said, you can take a moment to kind of get settled right now as we begin. Just gonna make sure everyone's muted. There we go. And so we're going to start with a little embodied grounding, and then I'll give an overview and we can kind of dive into the content. But I love to start with an embodiment practice. It's how I begin all of my group classes and one-on-ones. And so you're welcome to just observe this part, or you can participate in your body. It's up to you. And yeah, then we'll get into an overview of the whole thing, but just a moment to arrive. So from wherever you are, you could be standing, you might be sitting down, you're driving, you can do this carefully, and maybe just noticing your feet. So you might look down and see your feet visually if it's safe and accessible to do so. Maybe just wiggling your toes a little bit. Yeah. And noticing if there's any sensation where your feet are making contact with the surface beneath you. Yeah. You can tap your toes, maybe tap your heels. You might point and flex your feet. Yeah. And as you do this, maybe just noticing like what percentage of your attention is here right now, in the here and now, right? Maybe 10% and like 90% of you is thinking about your day. And that's fine. Maybe it's a little more. You can invite yourself here to just noticing the sensations in your body, right? So maybe just moving your feet a little bit. And then another option might be to shift a little bit from side to side. So if you're sitting down, you might feel the surface underneath you, whatever you're sitting on, or if you're standing, you might feel the pressure of your feet against the floor. Is there like a texture there? Like this chair I'm sitting on has like cloth on the seat, and then it has the armrests are rubber, so they're a bit of a different texture. So you might notice if there's any texture to whatever surface you're sitting on. Yeah. Another way you could move is a little forward and back, and just noticing perhaps the range of motion here. Maybe noticing that you're breathing. Yeah. See some of your faces softening a little bit. Yeah. So you might soften your tongue a little bit on purpose. Yeah. You can move your shoulders maybe a little bit back or forward. So you can choose the direction of these circles of this movement. And you might do both shoulders at the same time, or one shoulder and then the other. So it's your choice. Yeah, you could switch directions, maybe adding your elbows into the movement. That's one option. Yeah, noticing, are you breathing through your nose or your mouth? You might extend your whole arms if there's space to do so. Maybe noticing your fingers, you could wiggle your fingertips or notice kind of the space around your arms. Perhaps moving your arms just for 5, and for 4, for 3, for 2, and for 1. Okay. And just now we could move on to the head and neck. So one way you could move your head is to just kind of look up and down, and you can choose the size of this movement as well. Maybe looking up and down at your own pace. Ceiling to floor, or sky to earth, whether you're inside or outside. Maybe turning side to side. And just noticing perhaps what your range of motion is just right here in this moment. Yeah. Another option for your head is to just make some circles with your head. So you could imagine you're drawing a circle with your nose, Could be like the size of a quarter or even a little bit bigger, your choice. And again, you might soften your tongue a little bit. Separate your teeth, that's an option. Maybe going the other way. Yeah. You could breathe through your nose or your mouth. And your eyes could be open or closed. You can choose. Yeah. Perhaps just coming to a place that feels somewhat like center here. So maybe centered between leaning forward and back, side to side. You can have your hands rest down or anywhere on your body. And maybe closing your eyes or just kind of softening your gaze, any amount. And tuning into your felt sense of your body, just right here, right now. Maybe taking another moment or so to just get curious, like how much of you is here now? Like what percentage of your attention is connecting to your body, your breath, maybe the temperature you feel, any textures you feel. Maybe inviting yourself just a little bit more into the present. And perhaps noticing just right here if there's any muscles that feel tight or constricted. Like for me, I feel a little bit of tightness across my face, a little bit of heat on my skin. What would it be like just to soften any amount or let go any amount in those muscles? Yeah, just noticing what that's like. And as you're ready, perhaps going forward any amount and just acknowledging yourself for being here, for making the choice to carve out time in your life to be with your body, to learn about cultivating embodied safety. I deeply honor each one of you. Welcome. Yeah, so from here, maybe just allowing your eyes to kind of look around the space that you're in and yeah, just orient a little bit to your external environment. We just went inside, so I'm just noticing the moon right outside this window. Yeah. Yeah. So anything that you notice that feels interesting, you can just take a moment here. These are all just practices and ways to come to the here and now. Yeah. Okay. So welcome again. This is welcome to this digital way of connecting, this Zoom call format. Really appreciate you all figuring out the links and taking all the steps that you took to effectively arrive here in this space. And it's wonderful to be here with you all. And thank you for going on that embodiment journey. So I'm just curious, what you'll notice just right now after that brief introductory practice, is there anything you can just type in the chat? Is there anything you noticed in your body? Was there any effect of that little practice for you? You could just type it and I'll read it aloud. Thinking. So for me, I felt like kind of a warmth in my body. Yeah, Layla's feeling more centered, I would say, yeah. Feel kind of like a warmth coming through my body, like a movement of warmth. I was kind of nervous coming onto this call and that heat, and I felt the heat moving through, and now I feel it more evenly spread through my body. So that's what I noticed. Devin's noticing how scattered I was from the day and see how that lessened after the practice. The ability to even notice that felt like a big improvement. Yeah. Suparna, feeling a tingling in my shoulders as I release my neck and shoulders. Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes, Adrienne is feeling relaxation in my face and a tingling in my back body. Definitely more grounded and centered, says Ashley. Yeah, and so that's so interesting. This practice does end up being resourcing or centering or grounding. Yeah, feeling so much better, surprised by how little I was here. Yeah, yeah. So it does end up being a resourcing practice oftentimes, but it's not necessarily meant to be that. So if you feel worse, it's okay too. Sometimes noticing your body, you can feel like noticed my body. I was like, wow, I'm really hot. Whereas I had been blocking it out before. So either it doesn't matter if you feel good or bad. Just noticing the effect can be interesting. So thank you. So we'll come back to that practice. We'll talk a lot more about what's happening and why. But I just want to give you an overview for our time together. I had written on the call that it would be 45 minutes because I thought I was limited by Zoom, but I found out we're not. So I'm actually going to do the call. We started at 6:30. I'm going to go to 7:30. If you need to hop off at any point, you're welcome to. You're not stuck here. So yeah, that goes for the whole call. As we go through the content, you can always pause. There will be a recording sent afterwards. You're not stuck, and so you can engage and disengage as you will. But we'll be going for an hour. And so here's an overview of what we're going to do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what safety is, what felt safety is. That's the title of the webinar, and we'll do a little practice in our bodies, have a chance to reflect on that. And then I'll just do a little teaching about how the concept of safety applies to core trauma theory themes, and then what different ways you can work with that. So I'll give you a tool for working with it and some suggestions for how to weave that into your life. And I'll tell you about my ways you can work with me if that's a way that you want to continue to do this safety work. And that should take us to the end. So any questions just about the overview before we dive in? Okay. So here's the question to consider that really changed my life, and it's a kind of a simple question. You can write this down if you want to write it down. You can journal about it for a moment here, or you can just consider it. But the question is, what is safety? What is safety? It's an interesting question, right? So just introduce myself a little bit. I know some of you on here know me, but for those who I've never met before, Kelsey Gustafson, and I am trained in a modality called trauma-sensitive yoga and training in somatic experiencing and expressive arts therapy and Jungian depth psychology. And all of these modalities inform my work doing individual and group work to resolve trauma and also help people increase their windows of tolerance and reduce trauma symptoms so that you can just have an easier time in your life, in your body, even after traumatic experiences in the past or ongoing traumas or experiences of systemic oppression that might just be ongoing currently. And so although we can't change our external environment all the time, we can change our physiology. We can't change what happened. We can change our body's response in the current present moment. And so that's really brought me a lot of inspiration and fuels me to do this work. And that's a lot what this safety question is around. So that's my background, and that's where this information is coming from. And I've been doing this work for about 5 years now, specifically with facilitating somatic trauma resolution. And so just to begin on this safety question, if you'd like, you can think about a time when you felt unsafe. And maybe don't pick like the biggest time, like the deepest trauma moment, but like, was there a time in the past, like today, for example, where you felt just a little hint of not feeling totally safe? This might be a familiar feeling for you. It might be less frequent for you. But maybe picking something on the scale of like big T trauma to little T trauma, something on the lesser side. So, for example, for me, today I was driving down the street and I saw an ambulance coming towards me, and I had to pull over to the side. The ambulance passed, and then I kept driving. It was just a moment, but it was something that was a little bit unusual coming into my field of vision, coming towards me, and I felt a little bit of arousal. So, just curious, if you think about that moment in your day to day, or in general, what might happen to your body when you feel that sense of not totally safe? Like for me, my shoulders kind of lift up, and there's kind of like a bracing, like a pushing away, a leaning over. I mean, the ambulance is on this side, so leaning away. So I'm curious, and you can type into the chat if you want. I want this to be interactive. What do you notice in your body if you think about a time when you didn't feel so safe? Tension and anxiety. Yeah. Tend to feel frozen. Right. Tensed up. Right. So thank you. And I'm wondering, where do you feel the tension? Ashley and Adrienne are talking about feeling tensed up. Is there a specific place? For me, I feel it in my shoulders and my teeth, my jaw. Yeah. And then Devin mentioned feeling, yeah, tightness in the whole frontal chest and jaw. Yeah, feeling like I wanted to run away faster and quicker breath. Thank you, Shelby. Yeah, tension across my chest. Yeah, and then arms. So the tension sounds like could be up here. Maybe it's different for everyone. And then a few people said, I feel frozen. And Layla says, heavy and down, not feeling in my legs, feeling more in my chest. So there might be a mix of like feeling down, feeling frozen, not feeling much at all. If you don't feel much at all, that's also a possibility. Okay, so there's a range of different possibilities for how our bodies and our nervous systems might experience unsafety. Okay, let's let's move towards safety. So let's do another experiment. You just kind of shake that out if you want, maybe shake a little side to side. So what about a time when you felt safe? So, you might think of a resource. Maybe there's something right here. Like I have this little plant right here, feels like a resource. Maybe it's your water bottle. Could take a sip of water right now. Or maybe there's kind of a time that feels also kind of relatively neutral, not like your biggest, most ecstatic moment, but something that felt, relatively safe. Maybe just today. So just thinking about a moment, like for me, I felt, yeah, when I woke up this morning, I was in bed and I just felt relatively safe in bed before that moment, before all the thoughts came in. Kind of a little like snuggly moment with the pillow, with the blanket. It was a nice moment. So is there a place or a memory where you feel safety? Maybe just noticing that in your body. Noticing what happens when you think about, remember feeling safe. Maybe there's a certain person or an animal or even like a tree that felt pretty safe or pretty good to be near. Yeah. Like I'm thinking about my cat now. So when you notice safety, what happens? Like I'm noticing my body, I'm hugging myself, right? And my movements are a little bit softer. right? There is still a little lift in the shoulders, but it's kind of like a, yeah. Okay, so arms, warmth, relaxation, a smile. Totally, I notice a smile. Blood circulation in the limbs. Yeah. Anyone else notice what's the physiological experience of safety? Or that your body associates with safety? Yeah, I think there's something about containment here. Smile and feeling less tense and more creative. Oh, interesting. I wonder how you know that you feel more creative. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a different feeling, right? There's there's a spectrum. So the way that slight pleasure in the exhale, we could all exhale, or you can exhale if you want. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for going on that experiment. I feel it lower in my body, my root and pelvis. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So my perspective on safety and unsafety is that it's a spectrum, right? So trauma, when we've experienced trauma, which so my definition of trauma is anything that's so overwhelming that your body in that moment doesn't have the capacity to digest the experience in that moment. And so a neurological split occurs, and you actually store the memory and the body memory to deal with later. And so if you've experienced trauma, that split can cause really kind of black and white or extreme thinking. And part of trauma resolution is beginning to live into the gray area. And so one thing about safety is that it actually might not be safe, unsafe as two separate, distinct categories. I really experience it on this scale. It's kind of, you can stretch and move towards either side. And maybe there's a blend. Like I heard some of you talking about the blend, like Layla said, my legs are feeling more like heavy or dull. And then I feel more in my upper body, right? So maybe there's different things happening in your body at the same time. It's complex. You might be feeling a little more safe in one part of your body and a little more bracing, tense, or unsafe in another part. But if you begin to think about safety and not safety in terms of physiological embodied experiences rather than kind of cognitive concepts, it can change your relationship to them. And so one invitation is to just begin tracking yourself throughout the day. And you might notice, oh, wow, I just felt that contraction in my shoulders. I wonder if I'm feeling unsafe right now. And it's like you're checking your email or something. And, So this is the big practice that I recommend to everybody that I work with in all my group classes and individual sessions. And it sounds really simple. And it's been profound for myself and a lot of the folks I've had the opportunity to work with. And that practice is just the practice of softening. And this practice came to me through one of my therapists, actually, during a session where I used to get in this argument with him. He'd be like, well, let's, what do you really want? And I'd say, I just really want to feel safe. I'm a trauma survivor. That's why I do this work. And I'd be like, I want safety more than anything in the world. It's my deepest desire. I really, really want it. And because my body has experienced visceral harm, because I've been through so much injustice and pain and hardship, I know, my body knows deep down, I have a belief that safety is not possible, that safety isn't really real. And so I had this tension of these two black and white thoughts of, I really want this thing, and I believe it doesn't exist. I believe it's impossible. Therefore, I'll never have what I really want, and I feel trapped and stuck and frustrated. And is there something wrong with me? How could anyone ever feel safe? I'm so annoyed and hopeless and desperate. So does anyone else relate to that at all? Yeah? Just give me a little what's up? Okay. Yeah. And so, yeah. Okay. So I maybe that's not exactly how you relate to that, but that was my journey with it. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I'm getting a few yeses. So much yes. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the reality is, and this is the thing, is that it's not a safe world. And so I was in this therapy session, and I was like, I need to change like rape culture, and I need to change like cis hetero patriarchy, and I need to change like capitalism getting me down, and I need to change all these systems in order to like feel safe, feel relaxed, can't walk down the street. And he kind of reeled it in and said, what if safety was not about safety, but what was about your capacity to experience safety? And how I reworded that was, what if safety is not about external conditions? What if safety is about your capacity to soften and let go any amount, right? Because, like I said, I'll say it again because I love this. You can't change what happened. You can't change all of the external circumstances. You can't change some, but you can change your physiology. And for me, as I've explored this, the physiology of safety is the capacity to soften and relax just any amount, right? And so, there are things we can do to move from from unsafety towards safety on a physical level, no matter what your experience has been, or no matter what's you're moving through in the world. And I just want to be clear that it doesn't mean that there aren't like really real dangers and threats to your safety or my safety that exist. And unfortunately, that's the case. And there's a lot of injustice and violence and unsafety, and it's really not fairly divided, like who's more and less protected by the systems and society that we live inside of. And it is really upsetting. So I want to talk a little bit about the physiology of trauma and how I came to believe that it's possible to make this shift towards safety. So some of you, if you've taken class with me, you already have seen this chart, but this is the window of tolerance, as it's called by some people. I like to call it the window of presence. And it's one of the core concepts that I teach in my classes because I think it's one of the most helpful things to understand about trauma in order to have a better sense of what's actually going on. I think a lot of trauma survivors, we can tend to be like, what's wrong with me? I feel crazy. And there's an explanation. So this window, this blue line is like, it's like the river of life, right? It's a inside this river, it's all sensations and emotions and experiences that are tolerable and feel okay. Like your body, your physiology, your mind can tolerate them. If you're somebody who's experienced trauma, aka somebody whose nervous system might tend towards dysregulation, your experience of life of your day might be this red line, right? So let's say that you're starting your day and you open your phone and you check your email and you feel that tension. You get a stressful email and you go up and you actually go outside of the window of tolerance. You start panicking, right? You might start hyperventilating. You might start getting short of breath. Your muscles might tense. You might be responding to danger. You can stay up there for any amount of time, and then you can't stay up there. Your body can't actually sustain that for too long. So eventually you might crash down after that adrenaline wears off and maybe feel a little bit more numb, more dull, maybe frozen for a while, maybe crash out on the couch, right? And then something else happens, you come way up and way down. So in the course of a day, you could go up and down multiple times. Some people tend to live more up here. Some people tend to live more down here. But either way, if you're outside of the line in this direction, you're experiencing hyperarousal. So that just means, have y'all heard of the trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn? So the upper ones are more like fight and flight, when all of your system is mobilizing and the physiological experience of that is kind of what I was hearing folks say about like feeling it. You might feel it in your arms, you might feel it in your heart, you might feel more heat and everything kind of mobilizing. When you're down here, it's more hypoarousal, and that could be like a slowing down or a freezing. This is where like dissociation could happen on either side, but this could be kind of like chronic dissociation or feeling disconnected from your body, feeling numb, feeling stuck, feeling hopeless, depression. So this is more anxiety, this is more depression. But either one is outside your window of presence. So if you're in either one of these states, it's difficult to stay with yourself. It's difficult to stay present with yourself. And when people call this window of tolerance, you could say that both of these states are intolerable. And that's why, of course, when you're feeling that much activation in either direction, you might numb out or dull. You might reach for the nearest substance, your nearest device, your nearest food, your nearest fix to kind of numb or get away from this pain. If you're somebody who lives inside a body that has not experienced extreme violation or harm or danger, if your nervous system does not tend towards dysregulation, if you have a regulated nervous system, your experience might be this yellow line, right? It's possible to live completely inside the banks of this river. So, you get a stressful email, your heart rate might go up a little bit, you might be stressing, but you're like, I got this. I can stay with myself. It's not pushing me outside my window of presence. And then you eat lunch, you get a little tired in the afternoon, but then your energy picks back up. You can have different experiences, but it doesn't bring you outside of your range of capacity. So part of trauma healing, how it works, is actually broadening your window of presence so that you can actually become more capable of tolerating these extreme sensations so that you don't leave yourself as easily. But also, you don't necessarily want to tolerate these extreme states. You can also make your line become a little bit less intense and just a little more smaller waves. So you can do both. The reason I like to call it the window of presence is because if you're used to that intensity, you can actually experience this middle one as intolerable, right? If you're having kind of a chill moment, you're like, wow, everything's okay. And you're used to that high intensity of living in a trauma state. You might do whatever you can. You're like, let me get on a motorcycle, let me jump out of a plane, let me create some relationship drama so that I can get back up here to what I'm used to. So even though it might be intense on your body, it also might be more familiar and therefore more comfortable. Does that make sense? Or if you're used to living down here and you're somewhere in the middle, you might be like, ooh, like, let me just like crash out and numb out and like just zone out to be in my zone of familiarity. Yeah. So if you're healing from trauma and working on your nervous system levels, you might feel really strange when you begin to have experiences in the middle. You're like, what's going on? Things are kind of okay. Suspicious. That's part of the journey. So feeling safe might feel really weird at first, actually, if you're used to not feeling safe. So you with me so far? Any questions about that portion, about the window of presence, window of tolerance? You can type in the chat if you have any questions so far. Before I move on, we could just pause, take a breath, have some water. Yeah, just one more little part here, and then we'll do another little practice, and we'll close. How do you keep stamina to keep working on it? Oh my goodness, that's such a good question. Community. Signing up for something that you like are being held accountable for, like therapy or groups or like an accountability buddy or something that just becomes part of your routine. I think of it as a dose of medicine. So just like keep taking your medicine. Writing down when you feel good and taking note of the effect. What effect is it you're having? So in my group classes, for example, part of it is like every time you come in, you write this note to yourself, and at the end you have all these notes to yourself, and it's one way of just tracking, because what trauma can do is be really disorienting in terms of time. And so you can feel like, oh my God, I've been in this. If you're in the hyper or hypo, you could be like, I've been here forever and nothing's ever been different. And you forget about the times you've had in the middle. And so whenever you're feeling relatively okay, to write that note to yourself, to track your time, to track the facts. Which brings me to my next thing, because what can happen when you've experienced trauma is that, like I said, it can become really normal and familiar for you to feel unsafe, either up here or down here. And so what we want to do is normalize the middle. And what can happen is that if you're so used to that, you can start to get like a lack of coherency. So you might feel really safe and good when you're actually in a dangerous situation, and you might feel like really scared and afraid when you're actually in a safe situation. So your inner experience might not always match the external reality. So there can be some fact checking that can help with that. For example, if you've been in an abusive relationship that was traumatic, and then you're in a relationship that's actually safe and you're with someone who has like secure attachment, you might freak out, and because there's safety there and there's love there. That can be really, really hard and complicated if you have a trauma history. Or, if you have a trauma history and you're walking around in kind of like a neighborhood or an environment that is unsafe, you might feel totally safe, have some sort of inflated sense of safety that's not based on reality, when it might be good to be more careful. So part of the journey is also with safety is to get more coherent, so that you have functional arousal, and you can like speed up and run away and fight. Your trauma responses are not bad or evil. They're actually very functional and genius, and they're here to keep you alive. So you want to have functional fast and functional slow. You want to be able to also slow down and wind down at the end of the night and go to sleep, which is different than freeze and hopelessness. Does that make sense? So you really want to be able to do both. And so part of that is getting coherent. How you get coherent from a neurological perspective is getting coherent between the different parts of your brain, because I'm going to give you like 2-minute neuroscience. When you experience trauma, the prefrontal cortex and the medial cortex, there's a neurological split that occurs in the communication between the two. So that network, it is called the interoceptive network. I'm going to type that in. And so the medial cortex is the part of your brain that tells you that you exist, tells you that you have a body, tells you that you have sensations, and it also holds your emotions and memories. And so this part, when you're experiencing something traumatic, let's say a car accident, you want to, it's really helpful not to feel it in the moment. If you're still feeling that disconnection or that split years later, that's when the complications come in. And so another part of the trauma resolution journey is reconnecting these two parts of the brain. So does it make sense why they would split? In the moment, it's like really helpful. You don't want, in like a moment of imminent threat or danger, you don't want to be feeling your emotions, feeling your body, or like deeply in touch with your inner world, because you need to put the blinders on and just dash or fight or whatever, survive. When we're ready, when the threat is over, animals in the wild, they shake it off. But humans, for whatever reason, have evolved to often hold it and live in that split capacity. On a physical level, that can result in dissociation from your body, just not really feeling a lot of sensations in your body, or feeling overwhelmed by sensations in your body. Or on an emotional level, when that split is there, it can disconnect you from your sense of self. And so you might feel empty, you might feel hollow, you might feel hopeless, you might feel like a shell of a human, or like the scum on the bottom of the pond, or like this feeling of like, I don't even deserve to be here. Do I exist? I shouldn't exist. And it's this real feeling of hollowness, emptiness, disconnection from self. That level of, I would call shame on an emotional level, is very difficult to heal through top-down methods. It's really difficult to look in the mirror and be like, I love myself, I'm going to be fine. When on a physiological, on a neurological level, that connection is not happening. So what I found more effective for that, because doing affirmations when you have this like deep physiological um, um, activation or split happening, it's not going to work, because survivors really have a good way of detecting BS, and so you're going to be like, no. So it's better to go from the bottom up, in my opinion. And so all somatic approaches to trauma healing, like trauma sensitive yoga, somatic experiencing, sensory motor psychotherapy, even EMDR in some cases, are bottom up approaches that go from that, literally like the base of the brain towards the front of the brain, from the unconscious towards the more conscious, right? From the body towards the mind. Because that's where the trauma is really stored. And so once you heal that connection, you have less experiences of what body? I don't exist. And more experiences of, I have a body. I exist. What can I do with my body? I can take action. I have options. I'm not stuck. Does that make sense? It's kind of on a simple level, but you're like literally training your brain to be like, I exist. And with a sense of wonder and amazement and curiosity. Because the way it feels when you're experiencing that split is more like disconnected, and it can feel hopeless and frustrating. So that's when that split has occurred, that can, really be connected to these things where your external experience is not matching your internal experience. The metaphor of a split, and also the neurology of a split, for me has been a big part of the experience of trauma. And isn't it cool that it can change? And it doesn't change through like some fancy thing that you have to figure out, or something you have to like do right. It changes through small, doable, body-based, repetitive practice. It's doable. And what it takes, Layla, that was a really great question. Like, how do you keep working on it? Is showing up. And so this is what I mean by a dose of medicine. And so really in my teaching, it's based on everything that I've learned and what I personally find the most useful. And it is the practices of interoception and choice. And these are things that I practice like every day personally in every single session with clients. And so interoception is the action of noticing that you have a body. So we could try it right now if you want. So you can watch me, or you can do this in your own body. Maybe just noticing that you have hands. So you might just look. There they are. You can open and close your hands. You can move them farther away. And what if you don't look at your hands, or you close your eyes? Is there any hint that you have hands? You could maybe notice the texture on the top of your hand. And then the bottom of your hand, is it different? Ooh, it's so hot here. My bottom of my hand is kind of moist. Top of my hand is more dry and smooth. Bottom of the hand is more rough. Yeah, okay. And so just right there, that little moment is interoception. So even if you didn't feel a lot of sensation, if you were like, oh, my hand's kind of numb, or what hand? First of all, that's really normal if you've experienced trauma to have like a difficulty noticing sensation. Totally possible. It might be different parts of your body at different days, or for all of us, we might have different parts that feel more or less numb, or more or less full of sensation. And sensation is anything like hot, cold, rough, smooth, heartbeat, breath moving. These are all sensations. So when you just notice that and become curious about that, you're lighting up your interoceptive networks, and that's healing that split, and that's healing dissociation and shame. Isn't that kind of amazing? So if you can plug in, I mean, my theory is that like if you can plug in an hour every single week practicing interoception, and it is helpful to have other people with you, or like some sort of routine that you do, it will change your brain. And there's been studies on this. There was a study done on trauma sensitive yoga where people who had complex PTSD, who had not shown signs of improvement for 3 to 10 years, did 10 weeks of trauma sensitive yoga and showed a 35% decrease in their PTSD symptoms after 10 weeks. Isn't that cool? So it's like, it really does change you. And this is in addition to talk therapy. It's not a replacement. So that's the first thing that I think is really key. And the second thing is choice. Because when you have experienced trauma, you've experienced something happen to your body that you didn't have control over, and something terrible happened. You didn't want it to happen, but it happened. And that's what's so frustrating about the safety thing. It's like, wow, how is that possible that this unthinkable thing did happen? So that's a big part of the journey too, is like, wow, that happened to my body. My gosh. And that has to come slowly at its own pace. But so restoring choice, restoring agency is a really big part of safety, because it has to do with matching. That's where the functional fast is helpful, or the functional slow. Like if I'm feeling in the hyper arousal and I'm uncomfortable because my muscles are tensing, what are my options for maybe softening and letting go and becoming just a little bit more comfortable? Or if I'm kind of like numbing out or zoning out and I'm feeling frozen and I can't move, do I have options to mobilize a little bit, add a little bit more arousal? Like maybe I could sit up a little bit, add a little breath, and not too fast, but just a little bit, right? Either way, just kind of coming back towards center, right? So this part is about the interoception is beginning to track when are you feeling at either extreme of your range. And then the choice is like, what small doable thing could I do just right now in my body in this moment to come a little bit more towards center? And usually there's like something that might be reachable. And sometimes for me, like I've had a history of panic attacks and I feel so frozen, couldn't see at all. And I couldn't really move my body or take it. Like it would be way too much to just take a deep breath, but I could imagine taking a breath, right? So if you're in an extreme state of a trauma response, even like 5% of your attention going towards a counter vortex or a healing vortex is kind of what we call it in the somatic experiencing world, or which is just anything that your body could do to come back to equilibrium, is something that matters. And so interoception and making choices are something that I teach in all my classes, and they're really foundational for healing trauma on a physiological level. So any questions about those practices? And does it make sense how that's connected to experiencing a felt sense of safety? Because you're getting more cohesion on a brain level, you're accessing agency, and realizing that safety is something that is not just passive. It's not just up to the world around you. You can actually you can cultivate safety inside yourself as a practice. And even if there's some things going on in your external environment that are unsafe or don't feel good, how can you soften a little bit in your body, right? This helps restore the loss of trust, the loss of self-trust that can come with trauma. Sometimes for survival, we appease or say yes when we mean no, or go along with things that we really don't agree with. And that's just to save your life. Like that's a functional thing, but it can lead to a lot of shame. And so beginning to make choices just slowly that feel more and more in alignment with what you really want, at a pace and at a rate that feels accessible and good, is a huge step towards creating safety. So, yeah, let's do a little, another little embodied practice, and then I'll take some questions, a few minutes for questions. So after hearing all of that, because talking about trauma can bring it up in your body. So if you're feeling any sort of activation, or if you're tracking yourself on that scale, totally normal. It's not something to worry about. It's likely. So we could just go back to that practice of noticing your feet. Yeah, if you've been sitting down this whole time and you want to stand up, you could shift positions, or if you've been standing, you want to sit, you could do that. And maybe just kind of, I'm just shifting around in my chair. Yeah, tapping your feet again. You could look at them. There they are. Yeah, maybe tapping one foot and then the other. hmm Noticing if there's any sensation. Yeah. From there, you might notice your fingertips. You could reach them up overhead any amount, maybe coming into a little stretch. Maybe reaching one arm up higher than the other, feeling into a side bend. So you could bend as much or as little as you'd like. Maybe go to the other side, stretching your arms out any amount. Ooh, I feel that in my side. So you might notice if you feel a stretch somewhere. Another way you could move is kind of this spinal flexion. So you could arch your spine forward, maybe looking up, and then round your spine down. And arch your spine forward, looking up, and round your spine down. You could breathe through your nose or your mouth. Maybe separating your teeth. Your eyes could be open or closed. Yeah, we could just finish with a little breathing and moving. So wherever your hands are, next time you inhale, perhaps lifting your arms up any amount. And whenever you exhale, perhaps allowing your hands to come down any amount. Now as you inhale, your arms could lift. And as you exhale, your arms could lower. And perhaps just breathing and moving for 3, for 2, and for 1. And then releasing your hands. Yeah. You might notice just doing that inner tracking, turning in. What do you notice in your body just right now? Maybe a temperature, maybe your heartbeat or your breath. Maybe it's you don't feel much. All right. So thank you so much for engaging in those embodied practices. I am wondering if anyone has any questions right now. You can type it into the chat. And I'll just say, as you're thinking about it, that if you want to continue this work, or if this feels like it could be helpful for somebody that you love in your life, I am offering a summer course called Reclaim Your Body, where I'm going to be teaching a lot of this stuff. So the calls, it's all online. I designed this summer course with access in mind because it's summer and I know people are often traveling. And so it's all online. It's open to all genders. You can join from anywhere in the world. And it is self-paced and there's like a participatory element to it. So the self-paced part is that there's 10 videos. It goes over the course of 10 weeks. The reason why is because the studies that have studied these methods that I'm trained in has studied that 10 weeks is the minimum amount of time it takes to really see a difference and a shift, like a decrease in trauma symptoms, an increase in agency and body connection. And so there's 10 weeks. Each week you get a video of that includes a little lesson, kind of like the lesson I did today, and then a practice, which is kind of like the practices we were doing, except for it also includes like standing forms and lunges and a little bit bigger stretches. And then over the course of the summer, there's going to be 4 live calls where we'll do check-ins and we'll have time for Q&A with me. And if you want more one-on-one support, you can add one-on-one classes with me. And that way we can do a little bit of somatic experiencing, which is more personalized approach to actually resolving trauma in your body. So that's called Reclaim Your Body, and it starts, registration's open until June 21st, and we'll have our first call that Sunday, the 23rd. So I'll email you all that after this, but just so you know that the format and that it's available. It's also being offered on an income-based sliding scale basis, also with accessibility in mind. Okay, so Ashley has a question. Is there anything that is counteractive to feeling safe in our bodies? For instance, I've always felt like talking about trauma is a way to release it. However, the more I do, it almost feels counteractive. Like when you're telling your trauma story. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So that's such a good question. Sometimes telling your trauma story or like getting into that activation, or it can bring up the response, kind of like I mentioned, even just touching this topic from a cognitive perspective, it can, our body, wherever you go, there you are, there your body is. So your body is responding to it. And what I do, if a client or a friend starts launching into a trauma story, is interrupt them. It's actually part of my training, but like to find a way, and it's more difficult when you're trying to interrupt yourself inside your own head. But as a practitioner, what I would do is say, okay, let's pause and just like really slow it down. Because the rate that your body is experiencing this story or this memory is at a different pace than your prefrontal cortex is experiencing it. And so a lot can get left behind. If we focus just on the story, if we retell the story, it can be re-traumatizing, and it can get you into one of those trauma response states. What the ideal is to, if you're telling the story, be inside your window of presence. And what can really help with that is having a therapist or some sort of trauma practitioner to be with you and say, I'm going to help you anchor. I'm going to be with you in this moment. You could tell your trauma story and be dissociated and like having a lot of intense responses, and it could be re-traumatizing. Or you could tell your trauma story and have presence and be inside your range of presence and be able to witness your physiology moving through it. But there's a difference between experiencing the fear and being consumed by it, or being able to uncouple the fear from the physiology of the fear and being able to say, oh, I'm noticing my body's moving through a fear response. And I know that I'm in the room with Kelsey, and it's the year 2019, and it's Wednesday, June 12th. Does that make sense? So yeah, I do believe that embodied approaches are the only way to really resolve trauma. I don't think talking about it can help by itself. I do think talk therapy is I think talk therapy is helpful, but it's good to also have this as an adjunct of treatment. The difference between maintaining and observer. Yes. So, so yeah, it's like, you've heard, can you be a witness to your own experience? If you've heard about like mindfulness or meditation, of witnessing yourself or being the impartial observer, it's like way easier said than done. But that is the thing. It is possible, and it does take time, and it usually takes support from a professional, or having a really safe enough container. Safety is not a thing, but a safe enough container to practice in. But you can begin to kind of uncouple your identification with that overwhelming emotion and the physiology of that emotion. It's kind of a complex concept, but does that help? Yeah. And I want to honor that it is 7:30. So if you need to hop off, no worries. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to stay on for another like 5 minutes to answer some more questions. If you want to stay, you're welcome to stay. Okay, so when you mentioned signing up for something in terms of staying accountable with the practice, do you have any ideas, recommendations of kinds of classes or practices we can explore? Right. So yeah, that's the thing with change, especially if you've experienced trauma. I mean, I think change is hard for everybody, but if you've experienced trauma is like a sudden change that you didn't expect, right? You didn't expect that terrible thing to happen. And so change in general can feel like it can bring up that trauma feeling. And so change, it's good if it happens within a tolerable range, kind of slowly over a period of time. And what I think is helpful for that is support. And so some things of signing up for something or staying accountable might be a therapist or a group class. This is why I developed what I developed, because honestly, in my trauma healing journey, I didn't find any groups that were helpful enough. So I created Reclaim Your Body to fill that need that I saw. And so that's what I recommend. And yeah, so I recommend my course that I created for this. I recommend somatic therapy, somatic experiencing, sensory motor psychotherapy, Hakomi therapy that's not trauma focused, but it's somatic. So you can look into individual practitioners and groups. I actually don't know of a lot of other ones. That's why I made this. Yeah, but it's also something you could begin to practice on your own, um, practicing the interoception if you want to from your house. Oh, you're welcome. Ashley says, thank you so much for sharing this extremely useful information. Oh, thank you. You're so welcome. Okay. So I might have time for one more question if anyone has one. Oh, clarifying for me, I have been supporting a friend and don't have personal internal experience. Yeah. So when you're supporting a friend who's going through trauma, it can bring up your trauma. So our nervous systems are always in conversation. And when someone's struggling, it can often trigger your own trauma response. And so as a support person, it's good to get resourced and also to know when to kind of refer out or contain it. Um, yeah. Yeah. Thanks for supporting your friend. Yeah. And also, I'm a resource. I'd be happy if you have a friend. I've actually, in the last 2 days, I've been referred a lot of people's partners and sisters and friends. And so if you have someone you love in your life who could use some support, one thing that I can offer personally is um, a one-on-one phone call. I do these free kind of consultation calls, and it's a great way to find out a little bit more about what they're really going through and what could be the most helpful. And so I might refer them to one of my programs or to another practitioner who I know. But I'll send that in the follow-up email as well, that you can share with friends. Yeah. Okay. All right. So out of respect for your time, oh, you're welcome, Adrienne. Thank you for being here. I'm going to close officially, but you are also invited to schedule a one-on-one conversation with me if you want to continue the conversation, or email me. I'm available for that. I love talking about this and would love to support you. So glad you're all here. Thank you for caring. Thank you for showing up in your body, being open to this. And yeah, I will be in touch. So have a wonderful evening. And I hope you experience moments of softening and safety and possibility and coherence in your day. All right. Have a good one.